Now, fate, this mysterious force that operates in a million ways to influence our destinies, has turned the administration of our affairs into the keeping of John Kennedy. Just what this means, perhaps only a very few philosophically inclined persons can estimate. We will know much more about it when history unfolds the pattern, after the various personalities have ceased to dominate the public scene. We learn, therefore, from the chart of Mr. Kennedy that he has his sun, or the luminary, in the early degrees of Gemini. Now, what does Gemini tell us about the personality and characteristics of Mr. Kennedy? Of course, he is one of a vast family, inasmuch as all the world is full of people born under the sign of Gemini. First of all, we know that this is largely or dominantly a nervous intellectual sign. It means that our man was born with what we might term a mental temperament. He was born to work out certain problems by the use of mental faculties. Mr. Kennedy's Gemini situation, his planet Mercury and his sun, both of these warn that he can be intellectually confused, that the pressure of many different opinions moving in upon him will, in certain instances, confuse his own judgment. One of the reasons for this is that his judgment and the judgment of others are on the same level. If Mr. Kennedy had an all-embracing philosophic insight, which could absorb into itself the intellectual specializations of other people, coordinate them and unite them as instruments of some one purpose, he might be in a little safer situation. As it is, I would judge from his chart that he will be over-influenced, it will be. The next point that I think is of great interest in connection with Mr. Kennedy's chart is the fatalistic position of Neptune. This fatalistic position will have a considerable bearing upon his entire life and almost everything that he does. Neptune is found conjuncted to Saturn in the 10th house. This is a very difficult position. I would say that it is about the most difficult that a person in public life can have. Now, I would suspect from Mr. Kennedy's chart that the popular opinion that he is having some family difficulties is well taken. The family situation in connection with Mr. Kennedy does not seem helpful. There is just too much family. And the problem, however, is not quite as simple as it might seem to be. That various members of the family are also more or less rugged individualists on their own. There will be a tendency to use the president not merely as might be considered entirely proper, but that these various members of the family may use him merely as stepping stones for their own purposes. There does not seem to be a truly sincere family integration around the man. I think we should bear in mind another point that seems to be rather interesting, and that is the comparison of the horoscope of Kennedy with the basic chart of the United States. I don't suppose that there's been one president in the last 20 whose chart has been so tremendously involved in the basic figure of the nation. We cannot compare the two charts and impose one upon the other in the old technique of doing these things without realizing that the charts are bound together by tremendous bonds of planetary strength and aspect. There is a tremendous relationship between the two charts, more than perhaps would normally be expected or could reasonably be hoped for. These relationships, as is always the case in astrology, are both good and bad. It would be incorrect to say that the chart of Kennedy is an unlimited blessing, nor a complete curse. It is a combination of factors out of which we get almost something of the Oriental concept of there being a destiny in all of this. This man's relationship to the pattern of the country is highly karmic. It is tremendously consistent with the general trend of our own living and thinking. It was almost certain, therefore, that for woe or weal, President Kennedy will have a very powerful and lasting effect upon our national life. In his administration will arise some of the most complicated situations in the modern history of our nation. That never before has a president, perhaps, really been in such a complicated spot. That in the past we have had some very able leaders, and we have had some that were far from able. But we also have never had before precisely the situation in which the Kennedy administration finds itself. It is also useless to say that this tension is due to Kennedy or his advisors. This tension is due to the gradual forming of a pattern which has been building for years, a pattern in which the mass of unfinished business is almost inconceivable, and also a pattern in which world affairs and world conditions grow more complicated every day. It is not a nice pattern. So I would say that the president has certain dangers surrounding his administration, physical dangers. These dangers include his health, and where you have Saturn in the 10th house conjunct a planet like Neptune, you always have at least the remote danger of assassination. You have danger to life, you have danger to health, you have danger to public office in a great many ways. So the president's physical condition would, I think, justify a considerable amount of thoughtfulness and care. The next phase of his administrative policy that we might consider for a moment is the international policy. The comparison of Kennedy's chart with those of some of the principal leaders of other national patterns, men like Mao and Khrushchev, indicate to a measure that these other leaders have found, or at least pretty firmly believe they have found, certain basic weaknesses in Kennedy's armament. The tendency is for outside leaders to attempt to dominate him and to work very hard on this problem, not only directly but insidiously. In many ways, President Kennedy is under very heavy tensions from the planet Uranus. This planet is a very tricky one. It is a planet of great force, but it is a planet of great and sudden explosions and changes. Under these conditions, we find a man of reasonable abilities in a very difficult and dangerous situation, which will probably cost him much of his own peace of mind, may seriously injure his health, and may be one of the bitter experiences that human beings have to endure in this world. So altogether, it's a kind of a complex situation, and I think as a human being, Mr. Kennedy deserves a certain measure of our sympathy. I think as a leader, he has to prove himself. I think there are many people with bad conscience around him. I think that his situation is one in which we can only hope that this destiny which has guided our nation for so long knew why it put him here and what it intends him to do, and we hope that it bestows upon him the courage to do it. Well, our time is up.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.